Hello, folks. As we begin to transition from winter into spring, many of us will find ourselves itching to get back outdoors again. In recent times, I've received several new submissions I thought worthy of sharing. So lock your doors, draw the shades, light a candle or two, and pour yourself a drink. 'Cause tonight, it's storytelling time. Story 1. Last April, I got stuck working the late shift one evening as I was buried in paperwork in our small forestry office building about 90 miles north of Boulder, Colorado. One by one, my coworkers punched out and left to go home. I was so focused on my work that I hadn't even noticed that they were gone until I was aware of just how quiet it became. When the last car pulled out of the lot, I noticed a storm looming on the horizon. This should have been my cue to clock out too and hit the road. But I had deadlines to meet, so I stayed. The sky grew darker with each passing minute, and flashes of lightning lit up the sky, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. The weather had called for sprinkled showers with low gusts, so I was a bit confused when the storm intensified, filling me with a sense of unease and anxiety. Too much coffee, I thought to myself. As I sat at my desk trying to focus on my work, a strange sensation washed over me, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from the dark reaches of the wilderness. So I lowered the blinds, yet the feeling persisted. From time to time I peeked through it, and it wouldn't be long before I discovered the source of that anxiety. A bright flash of lightning revealed what looked to be a silhouette of someone or something standing just beyond the edge of the tree line, leaving me frozen in place. The dark figure was tall and gawky looking, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. I knew at this point this was more than just an overactive imagination. As the storm grew more intense, the figure became more prominent with each flash of lightning, moving progressively closer to the parking lot and revealing a pair of glowing white eyes that pierced through the darkness. The next few moments were a bit of a blur to me as I remember quickly gathering my things and beelining it for my car. As I approached, another flash of lightning revealed the spot where the figure had been seconds before. I had now lost sight of it, and that's when the real panic set in. As I fumbled for my keys, I was overcome with a tingling sensation that dropped a shiver down my back. I knew it was there in that darkness, but I just couldn't see it. Finally, I dove into the driver's seat, locked the door, and peeled out of there. Rain flooded the windshield, dashing any hopes of seeing whatever was out there. It was as if the storm was somehow related to this creature. At least that was the feeling I was getting from it. Anyway, I was able to get home in one piece, but the memory of that night still surrounds me. I can ramble on forever about how this experience has changed me and my administrative duties. So that's it. I appreciate your work, Rusty. Thanks a bunch. Ryan Page. Story 2. Last March, I was on my way home from work during one cold winter evening when I got a flat tire. I was about 20 miles south of Roadside, off Highway 30 in a remote part of Utah. I remember this specific area as my frightening encounter would never let me forget. Well, as I felt the unmistakable lump of a flat tire, I pulled over on the quiet and empty road, cursing my luck as I did so. Well, shit, I said to myself as I exited the vehicle and examined all 4 tires. The cold winter air bit at me with each gust of wind that kicked up from the endless snow-covered meadows nearby. As I rummaged through the tools in the trunk, I began to hear a spine-tingling, strange, low guttural growl that seemed to bellow out from the surrounding landscape, but I couldn't quite pinpoint the source. It sounded close by, though, and came in short bursts, lasting seconds before going quiet. This got my attention, as you might imagine, and I had no idea what kind of animal would make this sort of growl, but I didn't want to stick around to find out. I picked up my pace, using my phone's flashlight to guide me through the darkness that was quickly approaching. But as I finished replacing the tire and tightening the lugs, something caught my attention. I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, and as I turned, I saw a creature unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Something snake-like popped up out of the snow and turned to face me. It had the body of a worm or snake, but with a human face that twisted into a chilling smile. I must have been standing about 20 or 30 yards from this thing, but even at that distance, I could still make out the needle-like teeth that glistened in my light. I got a whiff of this thing, a stench that stunk to high hell, like that of rotten pork. I was both terrified and confused as I darted back into the car and sped away, the memory of whatever I just witnessed still burning in my head. What in the hell did I see? Like I mentioned earlier, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Of course, I'm open to suggestions, but I'll never forget my encounter. Thank you for sharing my story. Sincerely, Chester. Story 3. Late one night, while I was keying my wife's lock, we heard the front door swing wide open downstairs, making that eerily familiar squeaking sound as it did so. Now, just to clarify, we live in a rural, unincorporated community near Elko, Nevada, and about 2.5 miles from our nearest neighbor. We don't have any pets either. So as you might imagine, this was alarming. Now the weather had called for a light snow with some prevailing winds throughout the night. So could the wind have done it? After we collected ourselves, I grabbed my firearm from the nightstand and began slowly making my way down the staircase, my wife trailing, with the expression of concern on her face. And surely enough, when we entered the kitchen, we could see the front door wide open, swaying back and forth with each gust of wind. The night stared back at us from the open door as the snow began to make its way inside. When I lowered my flashlight onto the hardwood floor, I noticed a set of wet tracks leading from the door down the hallway past the living room. Holy shit, there's somebody inside, her voice shaking. I hushed her up, and we began to follow the bizarre set of prints that led into the darkness of our long and narrow hallway. The prints, about as long as a rolled-up newspaper and about as slender as a stick, continued all the way down the hall past the office, leading to the garage. When we reached the garage door, sure enough, it too was wide open. Instead of entering, I called a buddy of mine for backup. While we waited for him to arrive, I kept my gun and light pointed at that darkness, slowly reaching in to close the door. But as I did, a shadowy figure darted past me and my wife, like a cold chill in the night. Now, here's how I describe this thing. It was barely visible, translucent and tall, much taller than me, and I'm 6'2". It had the silhouette of someone wearing a cloak or something like it, and the speed at which it moved was insane. It didn't walk, it just seemed to glide back down the hallway into the kitchen. From there, it sort of hesitated before casually disappearing out the front door again. In shock, I ran over and slammed it shut, flipping both lock and deadbolt. We peered out the windows, turning on all outside lights, but couldn't see anything. We waited there in silence as the occasional gust of wind groaned outside. Finally, our buddy Kevin arrived, and we searched around the house and property. By now, the strange prints had been covered by fresh snow, leaving us without any clues or explanation as to what it could have been. We spent the next couple hours discussing what we thought it was. My wife thought it was a ghost of her former tenant, but the feeling I got that it was something else entirely, like some kind of multi-dimensional being or skinwalker. I've always been skeptical about these types of things, but I've remained open-minded about it. Whatever it was frightening to say the least, and left us both baffled. It hadn't happened since that night, but we're still on edge about the experience, and that was going on 3 years ago now. What do you think it was? We'd like to hear from you and the listeners. Thanks, Rusty. I appreciate you sharing this. Best, Dale and Debbie. Story 4. I had been looking forward to this solo camping trip in the Trinity Alps of California for quite some time now. It was the end of winter 2023, and it seemed like the perfect time to escape into the wilderness and recharge my batteries. The snow had mostly melted, and the weather was really starting to warm up. I found a beautiful spot near a small swimming hole and set up camp there. After a long day of hiking and exploring, I decided to take a dip in the icy water. It was cold as hell, but also invigorating, and I felt refreshed as I made my way back to the campsite. As I approached, though, my heart sank. My tent was torn apart, my personal belongings strewn about haphazardly all over the forest floor. I felt a chill, colder than the water that I had been swimming in, running down my back as I realized that someone or something had been through my campsite. By this point, the late afternoon sun had punched a hole in the tree canopy, revealing a pool of light where my campsite had been, but there wasn't much left. I remembered standing there, frozen with fear as I scanned my quiet and increasingly dark surroundings. I retrieved the bear mace from my backpack and followed a small trail of my belongings deeper into the woods. Each step felt heavier as I tried to keep my fear at bay. Eventually, I came to a clearing and looked up to see my dirty socks and underwear hanging from a dug fir tree. I couldn't explain it. Something had dragged my belongings up there, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what or why. I gathered what I could salvage from the campsite, stuffed it into my backpack, and left the area in a panic, knowing damn well I lost a lot of stuff in the process. As I hiked back towards civilization, the sense of being followed never left. Every squeak and snap of a twig made me jump as I clawed my way through the harsh underbrush. And at one point I turned to look behind me, in time to see branches bending and swaying, as if something was leaping from tree to tree. I never actually saw it, whatever or whoever was following me, but I didn't need to. The feeling of dread was enough to propel me forward, to push me to get the hell out of there as quickly as I could. And when I finally reached civilization, I collapsed in relief. I lived to tell the story of my creepy experience in the Trinity Alps, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had been lurking in the trees in that wilderness, watching me the entire time I was swimming. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I checked, monkeys and lemurs don't live in North America, and I know this wasn't a flying squirrel or whatever. Whatever it was, had the ability to clear trees in seconds, and who knows what else it was capable of. Maybe someday I'll write a book about my experience. There's a whole lot of components to it. Thank you, Rusty. Tracy Lane. And there you have it, folks. Just a few more strange wilderness stories to consider next time you too plan that outdoor adventure. Stay tuned for some new material headed your way, including a new case study and a fresh new compilation of isolated trucker experiences. There's some really freaky ones I'll be sharing with you before too long. Be safe out there, and you'll hear from me soon. Rusty over and out.